Have you ever stopped to think about how many beautiful and accomplished young women are taken by vile men simply to gratify their desire? An entire life along with hopes and possibilities erased in a single moment. What makes it even more terrifying is that these offenders have been living among us for years. Today, we will travel to the southern U.S. state of Arkansas and examine a case that has officially remained unresolved to this very day. Our story starts at the University of Louisiana, where a young music student named Carol Yvette Larpenta fell in love with her professor Paul Dirks. Let us imagine that they lived together in a very happy marriage as their relationship lasted for many years and brought into the world a beautiful baby girl named Nona. On December 26, 1985, in the small town of Zachary, in the state of Louisiana, Nona Carol Dirksmeyer was born. Following the birth of their daughter, the family relocated to the town of Dover, where the girl's childhood and teenage years unfolded. Nona grew up as a shy and insecure child. She preferred spending time alone and hesitated to form friendships with children her own age. At an early age, her biological father mistreated her, which had a deep impact on her emotional well-being. It is unclear exactly how long this abuse continued, but Nona never shared it with anyone until her father passed away in 1996. After his death, Nona became emotionally stronger and attempted to place her trust in people once more. During middle school, Nona formed a friendship with her classmate Kevin Jones. As teenagers, they confided in each other, shared secrets, and supported one another with their schoolwork. Over time, their friendship developed into something deeper, and the young pair began dating. In 2004, after finishing her studies at Dover High School, Nona enrolled at Arkansas Tech University, where she chose music education as her major, which required her and her mother to move from their hometown to the larger city of Russellville. Nona grew into a striking young woman who captivated others not only with her physical beauty and mesmerizing voice, but also with her immense kindness and compassion. Despite this, happiness did not come easily to her. Nona did not see herself as beautiful because she could not recognize what her friends saw in her when they encouraged her to take part in beauty pageants. Eventually, she gave in to their persuasion and entered the Miss Arkansas pageant. However, she was never truly interested in the prestige of the Miss Arkansas crown or any additional titles. Her real goal was to find a platform to educate people about what happens to children who suffer abuse at the hands of their parents, because the trauma she had endured earlier in life was permanently carved into her soul. Nona was an ideal volunteer as she genuinely wanted other children to be able to enjoy their childhoods and to have someone they could confide in if they needed support, instead of remaining silent for years out of fear. She held the title of Miss Petite Jean Valley and participated in beauty competitions to bring attention to the issue of abuse. Kevin was consistently by Nona's side, helping her navigate some of the hardest periods of her life. Those around them believed they were a perfect match, and they appeared to be very happy together. His feelings for Nona continued to deepen, and they dated for several years while making plans for their future. Kevin was a well-known athlete at Arkansas Tech University. In addition, both families got along well with each other. Life continued moving forward naturally. Nona's mother, Carol, later remarried a man named Dwayne Dippert, who did not rush to assume a fatherly role toward Nona, and she was perfectly comfortable with that. When Dwayne entered her mother's life, Nona moved out and rented her own apartment. On Christmas Eve in 2005, Kevin, after returning home from college, went to Nona's apartment where they spent a lovely and romantic evening together. After midnight, he drove back from Russellville to Dover. Once he arrived home, he called Nona to let her know he had arrived safely. The next morning, Kevin overslept. And when he woke up and turned on his phone, he noticed a text message from Nona that read, "Good morning, Kendall Muffin. I love you and hope you have a great day." Kevin was aware that Nona had plans for December 15th, so he did not disturb her by sending a reply. That day, Nona was working at a volunteer organization, while Kevin had invited his mother, Janice, to attend a Christmas party for teachers. While driving to the party, Kevin told his mother that he felt uneasy about Nona since she had not returned any of his calls throughout the day. He found it very unusual that she had not responded because over 1,002 years they had developed a pattern of always returning each other's calls. He sent her a text message that read, "Are you alive?" but received no reply. Where was she? And why was she not answering? In a rush to leave the party, Kevin contacted his friend Ryan, who worked as a pizza delivery driver. He asked Ryan to stop by Nona's apartment and check on her since his delivery route was close to her place. Standing outside Nona's apartment, Ryan told Kevin that the lights were on inside, but no one came to the door. Fighting the growing wave of panic, Kevin and his mother quickly drove to Nona's apartment. Once there, Kevin realized he did not have the apartment keys with him. So, he and Ryan began knocking and ringing the doorbell. But still no one answered. The panic intensified and Kevin felt as though his worry was driving him insane. He remembered that the apartment had another entrance, a sliding glass door at the back, and they rushed toward it. Kevin did not believe he would be able to get inside through that door, because Nona always kept the stick wedged in the handle to keep it firmly secured. But the stick was gone. As he approached the door and grabbed the handle, Ryan touched it and screamed, "There she is. Can't you see her?" Inside, Nona was lying on the floor, naked and completely still. Kevin rushed into the apartment, turned Nona over, and wrapped his arms around her. He shouted that she needed to be taken to the hospital immediately. He wiped the blood from her face and attempted CPR, but her eyes were shut and blood was pouring from a wound on her head. Kevin's mother, who came up to the apartment after the boys had called emergency services, said, "My son's friend, I think she's dead. There's been a terrible accident." While they waited for help to arrive, Kevin lifted Nona into his arms and held her as if trying to keep her warm. His hands were covered in her blood. He was crying uncontrollably, yet he could not wipe away the tears. A few minutes later, paramedics and police officers arrived. Nona had been stripped naked with an empty condom wrapper lying on a table just a few feet away. However, there was no physical evidence indicating that she had been raped. Her head had been crushed, most likely with the heavy base of the lamp that was lying next to her. Whoever had delivered the fatal blow had first punched her in the face, and then stabbed her several times with a knife, leaving shallow wounds on her neck and shoulders before striking her with the lampstand. The attacker strangled her with such force that the hyoid bone in her neck was broken. It was clear that this was a murder. Kevin was taken to the police station to answer just a few questions about Nona. Instead, he spent more than 3 hours at the station, being questioned about his relationship with her, how it came to be that he was the one who discovered her body, and where he had been throughout the day. According to Kevin, it was not simply questioning, but rather the police officer's firm belief that he was involved, accompanied by yelling and statements that they knew he had done it. As a result, from being known as her boyfriend, Kevin Jones became a suspect in her murder. Kevin denied any involvement, and when he was asked to take a polygraph test, he agreed. During the lie detector test, he was nervous and sometimes hesitated when answering questions. In the end, he was told that he had failed the test, which meant, according to them, that Kevin was the one who killed Nona. However, he continued to deny any involvement in the tragedy. Nona and Kevin had been high school sweethearts and had dated for 5 years. There had never been anything in their relationship that suggested Kevin had a violent temper or was unstable. Yet all suspicion immediately focused on him. But why did the police not examine other possible suspects more closely? The police stated that they had checked the alibis of all potential suspects, and therefore concluded that Kevin was responsible. On December 22, 2005, the state medical examiner's office concluded that 19-year-old Nona Dirksmeyer died as a result of multiple blunt and sharp force injuries, including stab wounds to the back, right side of her neck, and superficial cuts on the front and right side of her neck, shoulder, and ear. You would not believe how unfortunate the condition of the crime scene was, and you will be shocked to learn that the person who could have committed this crime had been hiding in the shadows the entire time. This raises the question: if it was not Kevin, then who did it and why? But let us continue in order. The investigation was initially assigned to Detective Mark Frost, who had never handled a murder case before. From the very beginning, the investigation encountered several serious problems. First, Kevin had significantly compromised the evidence by touching his girlfriend's body, hugging her, and holding her as he attempted to revive Nona. Second, numerous paramedics and police officers arrived at the scene touching and moving possible evidence. In fact, critical items such as the condom wrapper, the lamp, and Nona's cell phone were moved multiple times, and their original positions were never documented. Regarding the condom wrapper, police were unable to recover any fingerprints from it to identify who might have handled it. Nevertheless, within a week, the crime and the identity of the perpetrator were considered fully solved by the police. And of course, they believed it was Kevin. Investigators were convinced that he had intentionally created an elaborate cover-up, using his mother and a friend to help discover the body in order to divert suspicion away from himself. They believed he left the condom wrapper as a decoy to make it appear that a stranger had assaulted Nona and killed her. The motive was described as alleged infidelity, which Kevin had supposedly learned about a few days before the murder. Yet, no immediate arrest was made. Despite the police's belief in Kevin's guilt, the investigation of the crime, led by Mark Frost, ultimately lasted several months. During that time, from Nona's death until Kevin's arrest, rumors spread throughout the town. Police told Nona's mother, who had once cared deeply for Kevin, that he was responsible for her daughter's death. They claimed that he had gone into a rage and killed Nona. After entering her apartment and seeing a condom wrapper, believing that she had been with another man, they believed he had staged the crime scene. On March 31, 2006, police finally announced the arrest of Kevin Jones for the murder of Nona Dirksmeyer. A completely new reality began for Kevin. The evidence presented to the public included what appeared to be undeniable proof. Kevin's palm print was found on the very lamp that had been used to kill Nona. The murder of 19-year-old Nona Dirksmeyer shocked the city of Russellville, resulting in more statewide attention than any criminal case in many years. Before the trial started, the defense requested a change of venue. arguing that the public was firmly convinced by suspicions and rumors, and that Kevin would not receive a fair trial. The request was approved, and the trial was moved to Ozark, which is nearly 30 miles away from Russellville. Jeff Phillips, an assistant prosecutor, presented the case of Nona Dirksmeyer to the jury as one driven by the violent rage of a jealous boyfriend. According to the prosecution, it was easy for Kevin to arrive at Nona's apartment without warning because he had his own key. While inside, he supposedly discovered either a text message on Nona's phone from another man or a used condom still in its packaging on the table. At that point, he allegedly lost control and launched a violent attack on his girlfriend. He beat her, cut her with a knife, and ultimately struck her with the heavy base of a lamp, leaving behind a bloody palm print on the bulb itself. Investigator Mark Frost, who identified the palm print on the light bulb through forensic analysis, concluded that it was placed there during the commission of the crime, and not later when Kevin, his mother, and his friend found Nona's body. According to the prosecution, lying on top of Nona's body and embracing her afterward was a deliberate effort to contaminate and destroy evidence at the crime scene, which in fact resulted in police recovering very little usable evidence. On the night Kevin was questioned by police, investigators said they did not expect to receive truthful answers from him, particularly regarding his alibi, which they claimed had recently come together in a way that seemed too convenient. The prosecution stated that, on the morning of the murder, Kevin left his home in Dover at approximately 10:30 a.m., waiting until a plumber had finished and departed. After that point, Kevin's phone activity stopped for an hour and a half. The prosecution laid out the timeline of events as follows. At 10:30 a.m., Kevin leaves Dover and drives to Russellville to see Nona. At 10:55 a.m., he enters her apartment, argues with her, kills her, and leaves his palm print on the light bulb. At 11:10 a.m., he removes a condom wrapper from the scene. At 11:15 a.m., he drives back to Dover and arrives around noon. However, there was one significant problem with this timeline. Kevin's grandmother testified during the trial that she saw her grandson at a gas station at 11:30 a.m. on December 15. She stated that she spoke with him there and gave him money for lunch. If her testimony was accurate, Kevin would not have had enough time to drive to Nona's apartment and back, let alone commit the murder. In reality, there was only one piece of physical evidence: a bloody palm print on a light bulb. Yet, it was possible that this was an entirely innocent explanation, and that the blood transferred to the bulb at the moment Kevin discovered Nona's body while attempting to revive her. He may have accidentally touched the light bulb. An EMT testified that the lamp was positioned about a foot away from Nona's body. As defense attorneys examined the case more closely, they continued to uncover troubling irregularities in the investigation conducted by lead homicide Detective Mark Frost. Fingerprints were collected only in the immediate area surrounding the body. Officers who searched Nona's apartment after the killing failed to thoroughly examine the blood found near the front door and on the blinds, which were also smeared with blood. The bathroom was likewise not checked for possible fingerprints. Nothing was investigated beyond the immediate vicinity of the body. The bloody palm print was not the only forensic evidence present on the lamp. Later, police were able to lift additional fingerprints from the base of the lamp. The fingerprints found on the functional parts of the murder weapon, the rod and the base, did not match Kevin Jones. Instead, they belonged to an unidentified individual. The court also learned that in addition to Kevin Janice, and Ryan entering the apartment. Several paramedics and police officers moved through the crime scene as well, and certain pieces of evidence were handled and shifted. Regarding Kevin's palm print on the lamp, the same lamp authorities claimed was the murder weapon. The defense argued that the print could easily have been left there when Kevin discovered Nona's body. Nona's cell phone was also found inside the apartment, but it was never tested for fingerprints or DNA. Kevin's attorneys fought vigorously to clear his name, demonstrating to the court that there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime. The defense relied heavily on the testimony of Kevin's grandmother, which supported the argument that he did not have enough time to travel to and from Nona's apartment. The defense also pointed out that the attacker would likely have sustained cuts, bruises, or injuries on his hands and body after beating and attacking Nona. Police photographed Kevin on December 15, capturing images of the front and back of his hands and his body, and there were no visible bruises, scratches, or abrasions. There was also a strange issue involving Nona's cell phone. Although it was present at the scene, its battery was missing. The defense argued that the perpetrator must have handled the phone in order to remove the battery. Yet, the device was never examined for fingerprints. For months, the defense requested access to the phone, hoping to analyze its electronic history to determine who Nona had been communicating with. When they finally obtained the phone and submitted it to a forensic expert, they discovered that the phone's memory had been erased. The state later admitted that the phone had been given to Nona's stepfather, Dwayne, because they believed no further information could be recovered from it. The loss of the phone's data was devastating, because although phone company specialists were able to retrieve messages sent to Nona, her replies, which might have identified the killer, were lost permanently. The polygraph test also came under scrutiny. In court, the defense stated that, after reviewing the polygraph examiner's records, they learned that the individual who administered the test was not a certified polygraph examiner. They argued that the test was used as a tactic to pressure Kevin into confessing. Meanwhile, the entire town was watching the case closely, with many residents already convinced that Kevin was guilty. But was he truly responsible? The 5 jurors showed intense interest and enthusiasm as they weighed the case. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jurors returned to the courtroom and delivered a verdict, finding Kevin Jones not guilty of the murder of Nona Dirksmeyer. An emotional dam burst inside the courtroom once the acquit was announced. The verdict crushed those who loved Nona and believed that Kevin was responsible. However, anyone who thought that this marked the end of the story was deeply mistaken, because this was only the beginning. Prosecutors were forced to acknowledge that the acquit resulted from a deeply flawed police investigation. In the months that followed, Kevin and his family hired Todd Steffi, a part-time police officer, to investigate the murder independently. Todd immediately had the condom wrapper analyzed, and laboratory testing revealed multiple traces of male DNA on it. Since the DNA did not belong to Kevin, authorities began searching for a needle in a haystack, until an unrelated arrest brought Gary Dunn into the local police station. At that point, Todd Steffi was able to obtain Gary's DNA and discovered that it matched the DNA found on the condom wrapper. In addition, Todd noticed that Gary had been shopping on December 13th, not December 15th, as he had claimed during his initial interview, which created a hole in his alibi. After prosecutors announced on February 6, 2008 that the DNA found on The condom wrapper matched Dunn's DNA. The prosecution team shifted its focus entirely to him. Gary Dunn was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors alleged that he either assaulted Nona or attempted to do so before beating her to death. Gary Dunn and his wife lived in the same apartment complex as Nona. A subsequent police investigation revealed that Gary had been stalking the 19-year-old beauty queen around the clock as his window faced directly across from the victim's apartment. Interestingly, other residents of the complex stated that Gary had only recently moved into the neighborhood and said little about their new neighbor. He largely kept to himself and rarely had visitors in his apartment. Additionally, several residents mentioned that Gary had a troubled relationship with his wife. How Gary Dunn managed to gain entry to Nona's apartment remains a mystery, as Nona's friends insisted that she always kept her door locked. The prosecution suggested that Dunn may have knocked on her door and introduced himself as her neighbor, claiming that he wanted to ask her something about her cat. Because Nona's love for animals was well known, and given Gary's constant surveillance, it would have been easy for him to learn this detail. In fact, a bag of unopened cat food was found on the floor at the crime scene. When questioned, Gary's wife confirmed that he had been watching Nona for a long time in order to study her daily routine. Nona felt compassion for stray cats, often taking them in from the street, and this provided a convenient excuse for someone to gain access to her apartment. On December 15, 2005, a neighbor knocked on her door under the pretense of bringing her stray kittens, and Nona opened the door. He then forced his way inside and attacked her. Despite these allegations, Gary pleaded not guilty. When Gary appeared in court, his defense attorneys argued that DNA found at the crime scene was only a partial match, making it impossible to convict him based solely on that evidence. In addition, the defense contended that Kevin was the real killer and should never have been acquitted. This argument introduced enough doubt in the minds of the jurors that the first trial ended in a mistrial. During the second trial, the court learned that Gary had previously been convicted of assaulting a woman in 2002. It was revealed that he had earlier been charged with attempted murder and second-degree battery after attacking a female jogger in Russellville. Although he was acquitted of the attempted murder charge, he was found guilty of second-degree battery and sentenced to 6 years in prison. The defense once again challenged the DNA evidence. Prosecutors maintained that Gary was connected to the crime scene through DNA found on the condom wrapper, while defense attorneys argued that the evidence was unreliable due to the manner in which it was collected and the contamination of the crime scene. Gary's trial ended with a deadlocked jury that could not reach a verdict. A second trial was conducted, but it resulted in the same outcome. Once again, the evidence was deemed inconclusive, and the jury was divided. Although the second trial required authorities to release Gary, he was later jailed on an unrelated weapons charge before being arrested and convicted of kidnapping, attempted kidnapping, and indecent exposure stemming from two separate incidents in 2019. Gary entered a plea of no contest to those charges and was sentenced to prison. Today, Gary, who received a 15-year sentence, remains in custody at the Arkansas Department of Corrections facility in Wrightsville, where he will stay at least until he becomes eligible for parole. Prosecutors had initially planned to put Gary on trial for a third time, but they ultimately decided against it and instead requested that the judge dismiss the charges. Despite this decision, the charges could still be refiled. Kevin Jones endured the wrongful accusations and went on to sue the police department that handled the investigation for disregarding evidence and mishandling the case. In 2010, he began studying law. Kevin now works as an attorney and is dedicated to helping individuals who suffer due to police negligence or unprofessional conduct. He currently lives in Little Rock, where he is happily married and devoted to a labor of love that has become his life's mission. In an interview, Kevin Jones said, "Now I know exactly how it feels when people believe you did something you didn't do. And I would never wish that on anyone else. I still sometimes dream about her, about Nona. And I see her there again and again." The ending of this story raises a troubling question. Will justice ever truly be served for Nona? If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the Hidden Cases files. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.